So I figured that out. So now let me try to figure that out with my kids.
Wow, creators and presenters of the Sonya and Sacha show. This is really good. Again, the author of The Two Worlds of Your Teenager. We are just getting started, ladies and gentlemen. Sonya, you had something to share.
Look, I think also we know as adults, when we're doing something that we love to do, that's when we're in the best space possible. And we're feeling happy and we're feeling relaxed, and we're more likely to want to chat and have a conversation and let other people in. So that's another thing that we talk to parents about is if you're having trouble communicating with your teenager, then do something that they love. Look at what lights them up in their world and learn it. And so you can start a conversation about that topic, and then they will let you in to other things. So that might mean that you have to start understanding something that you've never even thought about or had any interest, remote interest in, thinking about, or you don't feel like you have the brain space available to learn something new about, something that's important to them. But in terms of their world, that's a really important thing. And so, communicating with them about that thing, doing that thing with them will actually make them understand, because developmentally our teenagers will go through that time, we know, where they're pushing us away as parents. You don't understand what's going on in my life. Nobody understands me. And, my parents are so out of touch and they have no clue what's going on. So if you're a parent that can actually analyze what they love to do, look at your child and see when their eyes are lit up and when they're the most excited and the thing that they love to do, and learn that and open the lines of communication by talking about that to begin with. It shows that you're interested in their life, you're trying to understand what's going on, you've invested time to actually study and learn about this thing. So you've got a much better chance of opening the lines of communication if you try coming in at that on their level in terms of their loves and their passions.
Absolutely correct, Sonya, because a lot of the time we couldn't care less about that topic. I mean, I know my son, he's a theorizer. Like, he's into watching YouTube clips about theories. And some of the theories that he's into, I couldn't care for the life of me about these theories. And he's coming at me talking about all of this stuff. And, we've had these conversations before where I'll say to you, actually, I'm actually taking the time. I'm learning about these theories, and some of them are actually really interesting. I mean, it's certainly not what I'm going to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching on YouTube, but suddenly I'm starting to listen, because then I can have a conversation and say, what about that? And start to engage in his topics of conversation, and then you use those to turn them around. So I'm going to open the lines of conversation and say, hey, what was, that was an interesting theory that guy was talking about. Never thought about it like that point of view. And suddenly he's off and can't stop talking, whereas 5 minutes before I couldn't get him to say anything other than a grunt.
I love it. We're going to take a quick break. I just wanted to read this little bio of our two guests really quickly. Sonya Karras, and for those that are trying to find them on Instagram and social media, let me spell their names really quickly. It's Sonya is Sonya, last name Karras, and then you have Sacha Kaluri, that's SachaKaluri, two of Australia's most sought-after motivational speakers, speaking to more than 200 school groups, parents, corporate companies, government agencies, and not-for-profit organizations each year for the past 17 years. They are the directors of the Australian Teenage Expo, their country's largest youth educational event. Co-creators and presenters of the Sonya and Sacha show on national TV program, and they have a radio show too, being social commentators with a column to the Herald Sun newspaper, one of the Australia's most widely read newspapers, and writing for more than 108 Fairfax publications, author of an international parenting book about young people, The Two Worlds of Your Teenager. Finally, for 2 years running, they are official Australian ambassadors for the United Nations New York Women's Entrepreneurship Day. Check them out at www.sonyaandsacha.com.au. We're going to take a quick break.
I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. This is the Billionaire Brown Experience. Let's go.
We're here again with Sonya and Sacha. And another question that we wanted to get to, we were just talking about how to communicate with teenagers effectively. Right? How to communicate with teenagers effectively. The next question that we wanted to ask you ladies is what to do when your teenager starts to go out and party and they think about their career options are all at the same time.
All right, well, I'll take the partying section, seeing that's my stuff. That's my jam, baby. When I first started my program, I only was talking to year 12 students. So there was 17 and 18 years old. And I thought, they needed to know about how to go out to clubs and bars and do that safely and that kind of thing. And so that's a long time ago now. And now I would speak to year 7 and 8 students, which is, 13 and upwards, about these kinds of issues, because they're going to parties and being exposed to all of these things at such a younger age than when I first began speaking in schools about these things. So I talk to parents firstly about just communicating exactly how they feel about alcohol, about the expectation of what age they would like their young person to start drinking, because we have quite a big culture of underage drinking in Australia, and even though our drinking age is 18, we still have, it's very common for teenagers here to be drinking at sort of 15 and 16 years old. So having a rule in their household about this is what I expect in terms of alcohol. I don't want you to start drinking until this age. And that is the rule, because as we know, if you give a teenager rules, they'll give you 10 ways around them. So if you don't have a rule, then you're not setting any kind of boundaries and it's a free-for-all situation. But if you have a rule, then they will more than likely try and break it. But at least there's something in place that you can say, right, well, that's been broken now, so here are the consequences as a result of that. And always, always, always knowing where they are, who they're with, that you will come and pick them up at any time of day or night under any circumstances, and not freak out at them straight away, like you're not allowed to talk about it until the next day. And just from a very young age, opening up the lines of communication about these topics. And you can have conversations with very little people, age appropriate, of course, about, alcohol and about the effects of these kinds of drugs on people. One of the best things that ever happened to me in terms of creating a conversation with my little boy was in New Year's Eve in Melbourne. There's a very big fireworks display around the city, and we went down to have a look at this. And as we're standing there with my little 6-year-old, I think at the time, he noticed that there was a girl who was literally crawling out of one of the bars down there, and she vomited all over the ground. And he turned to me and he said, "Mum, what is that? What happened there?" And I said, "That's what happens when you drink too much alcohol." And he said, "Oh, every time." And I said, "Yes, my son, every time." So it's like he's now turned into Mr. Anti-Alcohol Crusader of the world, but he still remembers that. And we talk about it, and that's the little bits of information here and there at an age appropriate level is the beginning of him understanding and always knowing that he can talk to me about those topics and ask me questions, and that we'll always be able to cover those things together. So
okay. And how important is leaving those lines? That's about the second time you said it as you were talking about it, that they feel comfortable. They could, if they do go out and something does happen, they have the lines of communication open where they're still going to call you as opposed to trying to figure it out on their own. How important is it that we have that relationship when it comes to partying, when it comes to drinking, when it comes to a social life?
Oh, it's imperative, because that's a time of their life, baby, where they're very vulnerable and they need us the most. And it's probably also the time that they're pushing us away the most as well. So I always say to parents, you tell them all the time, call me, I'll pick you up. I promise I won't talk about it until the next day, regardless of what's happened, regardless if you need to have a bucket and a towel in the car with you because they're so sick from drinking. You do that, you pick them up, you hold their hair back, you put a towel down on the ground in the car and you drive home and you deal with it tomorrow. Because if they think for 1 second that you're going to freak out at them and that will be the end of their social life forever, they won't call you. And that's when they start doing dangerous and silly things. And so I say to parents all the time, you must tell them constantly. And they'll say to you, Mum, you say that all the time. Dad, stop draining my life. You tell me that 1,000 times. Yes, my darling, I love you. It's my job. And I'm saying it again. You need me, I will come at any time of day or night. So I say to parents, you can have a little emoji that means that they can text to you a little sign or a symbol or a letter or a little message that you've come up with before. And that's when your teenager sends you that message, that's I need you to come and get me right now. So if they send you the birthday cake emoji, then you know, right, I need to go get them. Something's wrong. That's our little SOS sign. And I also say to parents, you can actually give your child one of the greatest gifts ever. And that is if you think that your child for one moment will not call you because they're worried about your reaction or they're worried about the consequences of their behaviour, then give them the gift of somebody else to call. So you actively go to your child and you grab their phone and you say, listen, if you're ever in a situation that you are stressed and worried about and you're thinking that you can't call me for whatever reason, here is auntie such and such, next door neighbour, blah, 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 friend that is, will pick them up and they will be safe in that person's company. And you put their number in your teenager's phone and you say, if you're ever worried or you can't get hold of me, then here's who you call. And that shows trust and it shows them that you're okay with the choices that they're going to make and that there's an alternative if they're stuck in that situation.
I love that. Sacha, what do you got for us? We're talking about partying. We're talking about alcohol. We're talking about social life, but we're talking about it at the time of their life where they're also thinking about their career options at the same time. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I guess that one of the most important things is how they are on social media. So we want to make sure that young people go out and party as much as they possibly can because it's one of the best times in your life. But be really cautious about how much of that information you're recording and putting out there, not necessarily even of yourself, but of everybody else as well. So, I think about how somebody may actually have some sort of perception of you when they're looking you up, because everyone, no matter where you are going for a job now, somebody will look you up, whether they stalk you on social media, just simply Google you, or look at you through somebody else's profiles. Like there is really, you can find information about anybody really, really quickly. In fact, recruitment agencies now actually employ people just to be able to look for people and give people the information, the background of what's going on. And so we always say to young people, of course you're going to present yourself as best as possible on your resume, but your social media accounts are really going to tell somebody the truth about you. So if my resume actually says that I'm open-minded and I'm flexible, but my social media accounts say that, I'm saying racist jokes and, my status says can't be stuff going to work this morning, it really does tell me so much more about myself rather than, what that 2-page document really does. So it's we're actually saying go out, do all that stuff and have as much fun as possible, but don't necessarily put all of it on social media. And be also cautious about what you're putting on of somebody else, because often somebody will film somebody else, upload that onto social media and tag them in it, and before you know it, that's, hundreds of people. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's gone viral, but even for you know, we can put something up and before you know it, 1,000, it's not like it hasn't hit 2 million hits, but 1,000 people have actually viewed it, which that's 1,000 people more than you really want them to know that information about yourself.